Hi everybody, welcome back to the wood shop. So here they are. This is what actually we were reconing those 4 woofers for. And now we get to find out what I told you all to guess on. So you might be able to see, I don't know if the camera zoomed in enough, but down here this might give it away a little bit. And yep, they're still covered with the original dog hair from the place that I purchased them. But if you look here, you might see the little realistic emblem. And yes, these are a pair of realistic Optimus 200s. And of course they're missing the woofers right now. But these were, when they first came out, they were only out for a couple of years they made them. So they're kind of rare. They're actually not super easy to find. Especially ones that are, the cabinets are in decent shape like these ones. The tops have some water stains on them from having a glass or cup or something on them, but other than that they're in pretty good shape. We're going to refinish them and restore these. And when these first came out, I think Radio Shack was pretty proud of them, because I remember we had 3 Radio Shack stores in the little town that I grew up in. And the biggest store, when these came in, the first thing they did was put them front and center in the middle of the front of the store and connected to an STA 2100D receiver, which was a 125 watt per channel receiver. And they were actually really good. And now that I think about it, I've never done one of those. So maybe that might be another project. Like I need another project. So anyway, these were actually really good sounding speakers. But when you take them apart, you realize that they're very simple the way they're designed. The whole crossover system inside here basically consists of 2 capacitors, a 3.3 microfarad going to the tweeter and a 33 microfarad going to the mid-range. No coil capacitor or anything at all on the woofer. The 2 woofers are 16 ohms. And they're operated in parallel. They're wired in parallel, so they act like an 8 ohm speaker. We're going to get a little more into what's so unique about that. But the way these speakers were designed, these are custom designed drivers. These are not just off-the-shelf speakers. They were designed for this purpose, and because of that, that is why they were able to have such a very simple crossover network, but yet have a pretty flat sounding speaker. So these are going to be pretty cool. So I'm going to take the drivers out of them, and the first thing we're going to do is kind of clean them up and refinish them, and then we're going to mount the drivers into them. I have the first patient here on the operating table, and one of the things I can tell you, I'll bring the camera over here close in a minute. The veneer on these things, these actually have particle board cabinets, which is pretty common, but they're layered with a layer of walnut, actual real walnut veneer. And this veneer looks like it's got to be a good 1/8 of an inch, 3 millimeters, 3.5 millimeters thickness, which is highly abnormal. I mean, today veneers are so thin they look like paper, but this is very good because thick veneer, you can kind of sand it a little bit before you refinish it. I have all the screws out of the mid-range tweeter and L-pad assembly, and we're going to pull those out now. And you can see this is a sealed back mid-range, and it says 8 ohms, 30 watts. These are all rated about 30 watts, all these components in here. However, the speakers themselves are rated at 150 watts. And we'll get a little more into all that later on. So I'm going to take these and disconnect everything, get them set out, and I'll show them to you, then we'll bring the camera over. So here's an up close of the mid-range, and you can see it's a sealed back. Not much to it. And it's a 6-inch diameter, and it comes with a mounting bezel and gasket. And then the tweeter actually looks a lot fancier than it really is. So if you look at the front, it looks like a cone tweeter type thing, or a horn type tweeter. But if you turn it around, all it is a very basic paper cone tweeter that's been attached to this molded plastic little horn lens. So it's pretty neat. It's got a decent sized magnet, so not bad. And then you have two L pads here, which are used to adjust the volume of the tweeter and the mid-range. And what I've done is I've removed the knobs on those, and then this can just pass through here. That way I don't have to take all the wires out. Although we may redo some of the wiring with a little bit heavier gauge, at least for the woofers. Down here, if you can see, that is your whole crossover network right there. Two capacitors. That yellow one is 3.3 microfarads, and the blue one is 33 microfarads for the mid-range. That's it. And then there's just a whole bunch of these little pieces of fiberglass, which we're just going to leave those alone. They're just kind of put in there. And you can see inside they even put bracing for the speakers. They put cleats in the corners. So these are very well built cabinets. I believe all of the drivers were built by Foster Electronics, and which now I believe is Fostex. But Foster made a lot of the speakers, including I believe the Mach 1s, and they made a lot of the famous receivers of Radio Shack's glory days. So yeah, pretty cool. So let's clean this up. I really don't have to do a whole lot of work, but just add a little bit of finish to the cabinets. You can see how nice the wood grain is on these. And the only place that I could find any blemishes was of either cabinet was a little bit on the edges here, kind of like on this one. And you can see there's some watermarks from, rings from people setting glasses. We'll clean that off. There's a teeny little chip in the corner that we may be able to fill in. And actually these are particle board all the way through, but they had, for some reason, they veneered them on both sides. So you can see here that the inside and the outside of these panels are veneered, but this is the evidence that it is particle board underneath. So I was wrong. I stand corrected. So we're going to get a little piece of veneer and fix that. And then we're going to just clean these up and just put an extra coat of oil finish on there. We're going to use that house dressing again with the tung oil, linseed oil, polyurethane, and Japan dryer. And these are pretty much going to be ready to go. All right, well, it's another day. And I just got back from Pittsburgh, and I was at the PNC Park for the Pittsburgh Pirates baseball team. Every now and then we get called in to do work on their x-ray machine there, which is really cool, getting to go in behind the scenes there at the ballpark. So I just got back from there. Again, it is a scorcher. It is super humid today. It's about 92 degrees Fahrenheit once again, 33 degrees C. It is hot, and in the shop here it is really hot. No air conditioning in the shop down here. And I'm on my last blue moon. So it's the last one in the fridge, but it's a cold one. So hopefully that'll keep me nice and cool. And I just started working on this cabinet. I sit it down on the floor to kind of get rid of some of the scratches and so forth. And it cleaned up really nicely. And I ended up taking some of this candlelight stain. It's a gel stain. And just rubbing a little bit on there just to see. I patched up that little crack that was missing. You remember it was all chipped out there, and we filled it in. You can kind of see what we did there. You can see the line a little bit, but it's not bad. And you can see when I did this, where I just rubbed a little bit of that stain on, it colored it almost exactly the color of the original. So all I'm going to do, because these cabinets are in such good shape, is I'm just going to do a very slight little wash coat of this with a rag to fill in the scratches on the cabinets. And then I'm just going to put on that house dressing that we talked about, and the cabinets are done. There's really nothing else that I need to do to them. And then we're going to work on just getting the crossovers cleaned up and putting some new wiring in and so forth. Here's a rear view of the terminals, and we're going to maybe change those out. I'm not sure yet. Put some banana terminals in there, but I don't know yet what we're going to do. Now, to my understanding, there were 2 different releases of this speaker. The very first one that came out the first year, they actually put this veneer, this walnut veneer, all the way around, even on the back of the speaker, so that if you even set them out in the middle of the room where the backs of the speakers were exposed, it all looked like solid wood. Later on, and again, I've heard this, but I don't know if it's 100% true. Later on, they went to this version, so that would indicate this would be the later model. I think they only released these for 2, maybe 3 years maximum. So that's it. Well, we got it all cleaned off. We've got a nice little wash coat here of that candlelight stain on there, and it looks really good. I mean, it really just, I wiped it off with mineral spirits, put that little skim coat, and I wiped it back off really fast just to kind of fill in any scratches, and it looks perfect. So really, this is ready for the final finish on it. And it is really hot down here. I'm out of beer, so I'm going to call it an evening and go back up to the house, let this dry, and when we come back, I'll do the other cabinet, and then we'll put the finish on it, and that'll be that. We have the first speaker completely finished and reassembled, and it actually turned out really well. I'm happy with the way the finish turned out. And again, the reason I didn't show much of the finishing is because there wasn't much finishing to show. I just rubbed on a little coat, did a little skim coat of that gel stain just to fill in any scratches, and then rubbed it down with mineral spirits, and then put a light coat of that tung oil, linseed oil, and polyurethane mixture just to put just a little bit of extra sheen to it, and then let it dry, and then rubbed it out a little bit with a cloth, and that's all I did. It really didn't take long. It took longer for the oil to dry than anything else. And then we installed the speakers back into the cabinets. Now, what I will show you here on the other one we're working on, we'll go over some of the things that I did kind of spruce up a little bit. So let's go over there now. Before I reinstall the crossovers, I want to show you what I did. If you notice, I did not change the circuitry of the crossovers at all. These film capacitors here for the tweeter will never wear out, and they're very good quality, so there's no need to ever change those. This one for the mid-range is an electrolytic, and it is difficult to get a 33 microfarad non-polar axial capacitor. Even the radial ones are getting a little bit difficult to find. But I found a really good quality one, and I ordered them. They were not expensive, only like $1 something a piece. But unfortunately, it looks like it's going to be a week or two before they come in. So I tested these on the capacitor tester, the one that allows very, different test frequencies and so forth. And these tested out perfect. Even the ESR was well below half of an ohm. And both capacitors for this speaker and the other one were very close in capacitance. So I'm going to leave them for now. We can replace it later. It's very simple. The other thing I did was I removed the pinchy type speaker terminals, as I call them, and I replaced them with these banana plug ones. You can also, as you can see, you can screw the wire in from the bottom, or you can use the banana plugs and plug them into there, which is what I kind of prefer now, because banana plugs make really good contact, and they're very easy and quick to connect, and you don't have to worry about this coming loose or anything like that. So I put those in. They fit right in the existing holes. I just had to open them up a little bit with a taper reamer or a drill bit, whichever you want to use. And last but not least, I went up a little bit on the wire size for the woofers. The tweeters aren't a big deal because there's really no heavy current or anything, but I went with a really good quality silver plated copper wire for the woofers, and that'll help a little bit with the damping factor of the speakers. So you know, just a little extra while I was in there. So we're going to put these back in, and then we're going to reassemble, and we're ready to test these speakers. Now that we know what kind of speakers these are and so forth, I'll show you the information on the back of the magnet. There's a couple interesting things. The part number is right here, 40-2029, and Radio Shack, before they went out of business, was selling a replacement for these, a recommended replacement, which was actually a 4 ohm speaker. They were nothing like these speakers and completely did not work the same. If you look, these speakers are 16 ohms impedance, and they are only rated at 30 watts at 16 ohms. However, if you look at the specs, and I'll try to post those here from the catalog, these speakers are actually rated for 150 watts. Now, how do you get 150 watts into a 30 watt speaker? Well, first of all, this is rated 30 watts at 16 ohms, and we have 2 speakers that are going to go in parallel. And of course, when you put resistors, or speakers in this case, in parallel, if they're equal resistance or equal impedance, it will be 1/2. So putting 2 of these in parallel will give you a 16 ohm load. The other thing is, because these run in parallel as opposed to 2 4 ohm speakers in series, it actually will have a different impedance curve from a different speaker that is 4 ohms that is in series. So these are a very good example of how, when they designed these speakers, they are not expensive. These are cheap speakers. You look at the baskets, they're just that flimsy pressed stamped metal. The magnet is a ceramic magnet, nothing's fancy. It's not huge, it's not a giant magnet. They're not high powered speakers. There's nothing fancy about them. Same thing with the crossovers, very simple. A single capacitor for the mid-range, single capacitor for the tweeter, no inductors whatsoever, and no crossover at all on the woofer. And you might ask yourself, well, how can that work? Well, what happens is the speakers themselves, their reactive load, actually acts as its own crossover in a way. And by carefully choosing the drivers and by carefully choosing these capacitors, they actually, and the box volume, the damping material, all those things come together. And when you put it all together, even though it is very inexpensive, the way it's designed, the speakers actually work very linearly. And that's the thing that interests me about these speakers, is how they can do something on the cheap like this and get fairly good performance. There's other speakers out there that have very elaborate crossovers in them and very expensive speakers, and you know, to be able to achieve this. And again, there's advantages and disadvantages to everything, but for what these are good. These are a good pair of speakers. So anyway, let's get them put together and let's test them out. There they are, the finished product, and they turned out really well. And let's take a little walk around. You can see the cabinets. They turned out pretty nice. The tops turned out really nice. I was able to get rid of all of those rings, you know, all those marks. And a good sign of a good sealed box like this is when you push the one driver in, the other one goes out. And if you hold one in, you'll see there's like a delay as the other driver pushes back in. Watch. See that slow delay? So the box is very well sealed. And that doesn't surprise me, because not only do they have the particle board with veneer on it, which helps seal the wood up really well, but I noticed that when they attached all of these pieces together in here, they actually used a more than just glue. They used like a rubberized silicone compound, which really helps seal that up. So there's nothing left to do now, but I guess we have to bring a little receiver down here and see what they sound like. So now that we're done with these, I'll try to answer a couple of questions that I got on the last video. So stay tuned for that. So question number one was, when I did these speakers, one of the questions was, how do you know, by putting that tone in there, when we used method number 2, how do you know that at high volumes, when the speaker's going at its full excursion, that the voice coil's not going to rub? Because the tone that I put in there was not at very high volume. Well, that's a really good question. In these particular speakers, the voice coils are very close to the pole piece. There's not a big gap in there. So even a little bit of being off kilter, you don't need a whole lot of signal in there to get it to vibrate or to get the voice coil to rub. The next thing is, not only do you check it with that sound, but once you get it set, and I put those clamps on, remember when we clamped around the edge, then you can just give the cone a push in like that and a push out a little bit, and you'll know if the cone is going to, the voice coil is going to rub or not. And you can make your adjustments accordingly. So that's not really a big issue. What was my next question? The next question was how, let me come back to that. Now the next question was a really good one. They're all good questions, but this one I really liked. Why did Radio Shack choose to use two 16 ohm drivers and put them in parallel, rather than get the more common 4 ohm speakers and put them in series. 16 ohm speakers really were not common, especially in the 1980s. They really were more common back in the 1940s and 50s, even into the 60s, with vacuum tube amplifiers. So you would see the speakers that had a lot stiffer cones, that were not they were using the larger sized cabinets and so forth, and those would usually have higher impedance. Some of them were even 32 ohms speakers, voice coils. So why did Radio Shack do that? These are very hard to find. If you go online and you try to search 16 ohm speakers, about the only thing that's going to be available is guitar speakers, which really don't have the same response and characteristics of an audio speaker used, for audio purposes. So a guitar speaker is going to have a more mid-range frequency response. It's not going to have the bass response. So really those wouldn't work. So you really can't find these 16 ohm woofers in very many places, and even the choices that are out there are few and far between. So why did they do that? Part of it had to do with the way they designed these speakers. By putting the 16 ohm voice coils in parallel, it causes a different response curve to this system than if you have two 4 ohm speakers in series. It also affects the low end power handling. You notice these are only 30 watts at 16 ohms is what they're rated, but when you put them in parallel and you put them in these cabinets, all of a sudden these will work for up to 150 watts. And these were designed to couple up with the STA2100D receiver at the time, which was rated at 125 watts per channel. So these really could take a lot of power, and as a matter of fact, they are very power hungry. This little Pioneer down here that we're using is only rated at about 22 watts per channel, and I can tell you that it really empties this amplifier out just to get a moderate listening level. Anything with heavy bass passages at loud volumes, and this amp actually tanks out on us into these speakers. These are not really super efficient speakers, believe it or not. They actually require a minimum of I'd say a 50 or 60 watt per channel amplifier to drive them properly. This does a decent job, but really you're not going to get any high volume levels out of this amplifier with these speakers. So that's why they did it. Again, it's all about cost. By using these speakers the way they did, these were inexpensive drivers, all of these were, and inexpensive crossover network. And really by choosing this combination of components and putting them together in this configuration, they were able to get a relatively high-powered speaker with a relatively decent frequency response, and didn't cost them much. So I imagine they made pretty good profit margin on these cabinets when they built them. But that being said, I applaud them because it was pretty innovative of them to set it up this way. So that answers that question. So that about wraps it up for this video. I just kind of wanted to share it with you and show you just a quick restoration of an old set of speakers and doing the refoaming. I hope I answered a couple of questions. And again, there is a million ways to do these speakers like this. So those were just two different methods. I'm going to get these all put away and everything. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with them now. I think my wife will kick me out of the house if I bring another pair of speakers in the house. So maybe they'll go up for sale. I don't know. That being said, I'm going to wrap this one up. And the next video is going to be a series. And we're going to get back to a little bit more traditional things that we're used to seeing on this channel, namely receivers. I have a good one coming up now, and I've been looking forward to doing a project on one of these for a while now, and I just haven't had the time. I've had one. It's been in the warehouse sitting and waiting its turn, and now I think the time has come. We're into the summertime, and might have a few evenings free to be able to work on these things and shoot some video. So it should be really interesting. And so stay tuned. It'll be coming up soon. And as always, I wish you all peace, joy, happiness, and good health in your lives. And until next time, take care and stay well. Bye-bye.